Hey kids, this is Ivan. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about the Magic User. After the video I made, I was kind of called out by a YouTube poster named Celebrum1 who said, geez, you really made it sound like the first edition Magic User and the third edition Magic User aren't that much different, especially considering your house rules. And he was definitely right. I missed some things when I was talking about this. Some of them I missed just for the sake of time, and some of them I just forgot to write down and talk about. So I'm going to kind of go over what some of those things are, to give you just a better idea of how the older Magic User is differentiated from things like Pathfinder or 3rd Edition or what have you. There's a few things. First off, cantrips. I mentioned it a little bit, but the cantrips in 1st Edition are really minor magics. None of them are ever going to cause any damage or give you any kind of protection. There are spells that you're used to thinking of cantrips in like Pathfinder or 3rd Edition. Spells like Dancing Lights, Detect Magic, Light, Mending, Message, Read Magic, Wizard Mark or Arcane Mark. Those are first level spells in 1st Edition. Those are not cantrips. And if you look through the rest of the spell list, there's a lot of times that they've kind of demoted spells somewhat. So there's some second level spells, that would be in 1st Edition that all of a sudden become first level spells and whatnot. So they've changed kind of like the spell power a little bit overall in the other editions. Not entirely. There's some spells they haven't moved, but definitely the overall power of the later edition Magic Users is a little bit higher, just in terms of what spells they have access to. Now, 1st Edition spells also have kind of a trade-off. Some of the spells have nasty effects. A spell like Haste will age you or the recipient by at least a year forever. That's it. That's your trade-off for being able to move fast for a little while. Something like Permanency will drain your constitution forever. You cast something like Identify, it will drain your constitution by 8 points for as many hours. You'll have to sleep for the rest of the night to get them back, and sometimes you'll even collapse. And that's not even before having to swallow the live goldfish or get the pearl for that spell. So some of these spells have a trade-off. Yeah, it's neat to cast them, but they're going to cost a lot, either in material or in stuff that's going to happen to you forever. So you kind of think twice about casting some of those spells. The other thing, in terms of saving throws itself, high-level opponents have great saves. In 3rd Edition, it's kind of more understood that the higher level you are, the harder it's going to be for some of your opponents to save versus your spells, because you get all kinds of additions for caster level and what have you. This doesn't really happen in 1st Edition or Basic. There's an optional rule in 2nd Edition I'll get to, but it doesn't even kick in until high level. And just look at some of these high-level opponents. 13th level Cleric will save versus spells on a 10, 13th level Fighter on a 13, 13th level Magic User on a 8, and a 13th level Thief on a 9. They're saving more often than they're not saving. When these guys max out in terms of saves, a 19th level Cleric saves on a 7 versus spells. 17th level Fighter saves on a 6, a 75% chance of making it. A 21st level Wizard saves on a 4, and a 21st level Thief saves on a 5. 80% of the time he's going to make that save. And these are before any kind of modifiers they have. These guys just have great saves. And that extends to monsters. Most monsters save as fighters unless they have some kind of other ability. So a lot of them are saving exceptionally well versus spells. Now, there's also no ranged attacks in 1st Edition. That's not how Wizards operate. This can kind of go both ways. I had a long thread on this on Dragon's Foot and on RPGNet, I believe. We were talking about just what the percentage chance of those were. At low level, it kind of makes it harder on the caster. At high level, you'll actually have about a 40% better chance of hitting somebody with a spell using a ranged touch attack than you would by having them save. So it's a lot more powerful in that way in 3rd Edition, based or compared to 1st Edition in terms of that sort of stuff. However, there are a lot of 1st Edition spells that just have no save whatsoever. You're not going to save versus this puppy, and that's kind of cool. And those are some of the neater magics. But there's less of those in the 3rd Edition. But there's actually a ton of spells that have no save in 1st Edition and in Basic. Just thinking of Wizard battles happen really fast in 1st Edition. Whoever loses initiative is probably going down. Now, you look at like 2 6th level Wizards with their 6d6 fireballs. The 6th level Wizard's going to have an average of, I believe, like 15 hit points before any con modifiers. Fireball's going to do an average of 21 hit points of damage. He fails his save, he's dead. If he makes the save, he's going to take an average of 10.5 points of damage, so he's going to be almost dead. So these things are rather deadly. He's probably going to make a save, but it's probably not going to be that great. Once you get up to higher caster levels, there is this alternate 2nd Edition rule I use, where starting at 13th level, like every 3 levels, you have your opponents save at -1, for each 3 levels, and that goes all the way up to, I believe it's level 28, where they're saving at -6. So that kind of helps the higher level casters out, but that doesn't kick in for quite some time, and already you're kind of competing against some pretty huge saves. In most of those cases, those high level opponents are still going to save more often than not. Now, there's no concentration checks in first edition. When you get hit by somebody when you're casting a spell, if they, during those number of segments where you're casting a spell, the spell's gone. It's ruined. You don't get to make some kind of D20 concentration check and see, what was my difficulty level, how many points of damage did I take. The spell's gone. That's it, Charlie. It's all over. Also, in terms of armor, well, in first edition you're not supposed to wear armor. I use some of the tables from like Hackmaster, but even there, the difficulty or the chance of spell failure wearing that armor is a lot higher in like all the clones than it is in third edition. It's generally about 20% higher. Chainmail would be a 30% chance of failure. In third edition, it's a 50% chance in something like Hackmaster. And using shields can be just, or like a large handheld weapon can totally nerf the spell, because you need to have your hands free. There's no things like eschew materials in first edition. The components are the components. You can't just have a little special feat and get away with it. And like I said before, the casting time is incredibly powerful. Now, magic items also are not an expected thing. I know that's also more in 4th edition too. You get the magic items when you find them. Having a magic item like, bracers of defense, rings of protection, these are like really important things. When you find them, you kind of give these to the party magic user, because he's the guy that's going to need it. Because one of the other things that happens to magic users in first edition and basic is when they're casting spells, they don't get their dex bonus to their AC. They're standing stock still, and that's it. So if this guy has a really great dex and maybe has dex, armor class of 13, or 7, depending on how you're looking at it, rather than 10, that's great until he starts casting a spell, and then he's just sitting there dead meat. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. So those are some of the more of the differences between the older magic users and the third edition and up. So hopefully I redeem myself a little bit with Celebrum. Have a good one.